Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Jeff Fuller with you. Jay Fuller Interviews. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube. Join the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews, and Instagram and Twitter, Jay Fuller Interviews. I believe people's stories make our stories much better if we'll just stop, listen, and learn from their experience. You can also listen on Google Podcasts or Apple iTunes, as the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews is there. One with a great story is Kyle Mack. Kyle, how are you?
I'm good, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. So I'll get to it. I call you Kyle Mack because I cannot pronounce your last name. What's the appropriate pronunciation of your last name?
McAlarney.
All right. So we'll go with that. And whatever you say, I apologize. My camera's a little messed up. But for those listening on the podcast, that does not matter. So I listened to Doug Gottlieb's All Ball podcast, one of my favorite podcasts ever. I just love basketball, and I think he does a great job. How did you get notified or alerted to become a guest on that program?
I've been a listener to Doug for a long time. Uh, since my time playing overseas, I got into podcasts, and I'm huge on podcasts. I subscribe to probably too many of them. But so and Doug and I obviously have a shared story in Notre Dame and everything, and so we just stayed in touch online vaguely, and I just kept telling him that I'm a listener, I'm a follower, and I love his commentary and I love his stuff. And he kept asking me to come on, and I kept telling him anytime I'm ready, anytime I'm ready, anytime I'm ready. Finally, he felt I was worthy enough to come on his show. So after years of talking about it.
Good times. And he had it incorrect, which was good for me, prompted me that you are no longer coaching, but you are now part of prioritysports.biz. And I just want to bring up that now. What led you to this venture? And I know that Gordon Hayward is one of your clients that you work with. Just talk about that relationship a little bit with prioritysports.biz.
So, good buddy of mine, one of my best friends, has been working for Priority for a long time, and I was coaching at the time, but I was also training players. I've been training basketball players since I was about 15 years old, to be honest with you. And so I have a lot of experience in it. And one of their bigger clients, Gordon, was looking for somebody different with a different perspective, and asked if I'd be willing to travel a little bit and to try it out. And I did. And the relationship kind of took off from there. We worked together throughout the whole year, the whole season, and developed relationships inside of Priority Sports, and conversations evolved into, potentially leaving coaching and pursuing this full time because I just liked it. It checked a lot of boxes for me, and the rest is history.
And Kyle, in the picture that I showed before, then this one, you are dribbling with your left hand. Are you left-handed?
Right-handed, righty.
Now, I asked Doug Gottlieb the same question when I was fortunate enough to interview him. Good basketball players, or let me say, sons of coaches, learn how to use their left hand. Was your dad a coach?
My dad was not a coach. My dad is a lefty.
Okay.
But my dad was a professional baseball player.
Now,
But he was not a coach. No, he was not a coach.
when did you learn that you could get at least 3 shots off less contested if you used your left hand versus that of your strong hand?
Probably in one-on-one battles in front of my house with my older brother that were glorified wars. And he was bigger than me, stronger than me, faster than me, and you got to get creative and crafty and figure out different ways to create space. And that's probably when I learned, and that was early. So I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I really started to get into the game and get serious about it and start to practice and work on things like developing my offhand.
Now, talk to me a little bit about your older brother. My older brother, 2 years older, he was all state for Vermont. I was all bench warmer for the small Christian school I went to. He's someone that was so much better. I just looked up to him, and I never got past him. I think I beat him at 1-on-1 3 years ago when I was 42, and he's just old and out of shape. What was that relation like for your brother, and when did you surpass him basketball-wise?
So When I surpassed him, probably my sophomore year in high school is when I surpassed him, both physically and from a skill perspective. But growing up, man, and you hit on it, Jeff. Like when you're the little brother, like you just want to be just like your older brother, right? And at the end of the day, like it's such a weird thing because I probably sought out his validation more than anybody else in my life at the time, right? Because he was the cool one. He had the best clothes that I stole from time to time. I was stealing his hoodies, and so right now to this day, my brother and my relationship is incredibly strong. I love my brother. There were some contentious moments there in the past growing up, but a lot of it stemmed from me just wanting to be like him, right? And wanting to be good enough and cool enough, and playing one on one versus him in front of my house was a big part or a big, you know, motivating factor for me to get better and to improve to see if I could beat him.
So the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Before I ask you about finding the Irish, did you happen to watch that football game Saturday night?
I watched a little bit of it. Yes, I did watch a little bit of it. I'm not a big football guy. I'm so entrenched in the game of basketball that I almost on purpose, I try not to watch any other sports religiously, to be honest with you. But Notre Dame is my heart, man. So I do like to support them any way I can. I watched a little bit of it. I didn't catch the end, unfortunately, but obviously a big win for us.
Definitely. Now, when you chose Notre Dame, did you kind of like the fact that they're more of a football school so you could kind of hide, or how did that play into it?
That's an interesting question, Jeff. I appreciate that question because I I think so. I think so. To be honest with you, I got recruited by a lot of schools, and most of them I would say are quote unquote basketball schools. But Notre Dame obviously is a football school, and quite frankly, it'll always be a football school. The history is just so strong there with the football program. It wasn't. I don't think it was. It was a matter of you can hide there. Um, I just think that it was. It's a unique culture that when I went on my visit, it checked a lot of boxes for me and my parents at the time, and it was more about the culture of the school and how they really, especially Notre Dame, man. You're not even considered a student athlete. You considered a student, and then athlete is like down the rung. Like you really have to study and do your work in the classroom. They prefer that you room with non-athletes and regular students to integrate you more into the population. And me being a New York City guy, from New York City, I always liked cities because I felt like I like being around people, but also at the same time being, people not knowing much about me. And so it's an interesting question that you asked there. And I haven't really thought about that too much, but I'm sure at the time it played into part of my decision given my personality.
Now, I think it was with Doug Gottlieb on the All Ball podcast when you guys were talking about high school. You could kind of make your way through academically, but then, as you just mentioned, being a student first. Were you ever in jeopardy of not being able to play because of the academic side?
No, 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 not academically. No, I was fortunate enough early on in my life to create good habits around my academics. Again, fortunate enough to have good people around me, including my parents, who always emphasized the classroom and taking care of my business in that realm. So I I always did what I had to do academically, and didn't never really had any issues there. And I credit that to just the habits that I developed of studying, being on top of things, getting ahead of things, not procrastinating and whatnot. And I did have, honestly, Jeff, at Notre Dame, there's so many resources for student athletes there. Academic advisors and tutors and whatnot. They're at your disposal 24 hours a day. So it's if you do the right thing and you use those resources, you'll be fine. And I was fortunate enough to have the foresight to do that.
So Kyle Mack, make some time. Check out prioritysports.biz, prioritysports.biz for more information. Behind me is a picture of you on the cover of Sports Illustrated. First question, number 23, was that simply because Notre Dame didn't have the number you wanted? You're a Jordan fan. Where did 23 come from?
I'm obviously a Jordan fan, but to be honest with you, Jeff, when I was a junior in high school, um, at the time, my high school, small Catholic high school in Staten Island, um, not a lot of money, not a big budget. I got I got first picked at the numbers, and the numbers weren't good, right? It was like 23 and then like 37, you know. So I picked 23, and I stayed with it. My freshman year, coming to South Bend at Notre Dame, it was available, and just in an effort to just keep things consistent, I'd stuck with 23. When I became a pro, though, I played overseas for a while. I did not have 23. I had number 12 and then number 6 for the last about 6 years of my career. I had number 6.
Hey, talk to me a little bit about this picture behind me on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I know my friends would have given me crap if I ever made something like a cover of a magazine. Your closest friends, did they kind of poke a little fun at you, or talk about that experience?
Yeah, man. My boys from back home, they always gave me crap about everything. And this picture right here, like, it looks fine now, but when I look at it, it's like when you listen to yourself, I almost feel like I'm having a panic attack, like, because it's such a fake smile, and so put on. But so my boys gave me crap for that one, but I have that framed to this day. I do have that picture framed because it's a very proud thing, being on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Now, there's nothing like high school teammates. I mean, college teammates are close as well, but some of the guys you grew up with, can you just talk about the importance of those relationships that you still have in your life?
Those are my guys, man. They're like my brothers. My three buddies of mine from high school. One of them is an Army Ranger now. He's actually over in Kuwait right now. My other buddy was in the Navy, moved down to Texas, and our other buddy is still living in New York. He's an accountant in New York. But those relationships are cemented before any of us ever had our. We were 13 to 18 years old. We were hanging out every single day and really figuring out our life and our paths. And it's funny and you probably know this too, when you get together with your buddies from back home in the day, it's like nothing's ever changed. So I'm big on family. Family is the most important thing to me, and family doesn't just mean blood. Family means those guys as well. And so we keep in touch. They keep me grounded. Like we just talked about in the picture. I think I'm a big shot on the front cover of Sports Illustrated, and here they are giving me crap about it and making fun of me, and it keeps it light. I never find myself taking myself too seriously because of them. And again, I don't think you can know where you're going in life unless you know where you come from. And I hold those relationships very dear to me.
Kyle, share with me a little bit about playing overseas. Obviously, everybody wants to play in the NBA. I believe you played summer league and had a cup of coffee at a couple spots, but just those in the military that we celebrate this week, being overseas, seeing the world. Can you just share a little bit of your most prized experiences?
Yeah, unbelievable experience, Jeff. My wife and I, we cherish our time over there. Greece, Israel, China, and mostly in France. And we miss it every single day. To be honest with you, we miss the lifestyle, miss the pace. We made some great friends, have some really strong relationships over there, and I think what it does to you is it opens up your mind and it sort of opens up your world, that you start to get a picture of what's out there, and that people are just people. People are looking for love. They're looking for close relationships. They're looking to feel important, and that exists everywhere. And unless you're putting yourself in those situations where you're away from family, you're away from home, and you're away from your routines and everything that's familiar, you don't really get a true sense of that. So I think for us, it was really important for our development as a couple, my wife and I, individually, and then as we're parents, and the things that we talk about to our kids is acceptance, and learning about other cultures, and it's a really important aspect of life that you could kind of go through life and just kind of trot along and never really experience that. So I think it willingly put yourself in those situations, and I was fortunate enough to have those experiences through basketball. But I think it's important, and I cherish my time specifically in France. France was great to us, and I played 7 years there, 5 years with one club, and um, one of the best memories of my entire life was when I retired. My last game with my club in France, they gave me a standing ovation, and they gave me a couple gifts in front of everybody. It was an amazing experience. They brought my family out to the court, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I was going to pull that picture off the web, but I did not. So I apologize about that. But I find it almost comical because here in Vermont, we have a couple Division III NCAA schools, and a couple kids that I've gotten to know came from Philadelphia, and they thought it'd be easy to play up here in Vermont, but they realized even in Division III, there's some tough competition. For you going overseas as an American, when did that maybe rude awakening happen where you realize that, man, there's some good ballers all over this
Yeah,
planet?
very quickly, very quickly. I think being humbled in not just basketball, but in your life is part of the process. It's part of growing as a person, as a player. And the quicker it happens, the better off you're going to be. And so for me, it was very quickly into my professional career. I think you come up against grown men. I'm 21 years old playing against a 35-year-old. There's a difference there physically, right? But there's also a difference between that 35-year-old's experiences in the game and all the lessons that he's learned that I've yet to learn. And the game moves much slower for him. So uh, you're humbled pretty quickly over there, and basketball is a global game, and the talent is very, very good. And you could play high level basketball in almost every country in the world. And, um, very quickly when I went over there, it was, I had to adapt or die. And that's what it still is overseas. It is very, very difficult to make a career playing over there because guys have a hard time figuring it out. And part of it could be that they think just because they're from America, that all this just being from America, that they're better than everybody else. And that's just not the case.
So share with me, do you watch the NBA now? Were you intrigued by the bubble, or do you even have time to watch professional sports?
Oh, man. Well, the NBA, I watch almost every game, to be honest with you. So, yes, I watch every single game. And again, that's part of the reason why I purposefully try not to engage or get involved with watching other sports, because there's so much going on in the NBA, and the NBA in particular. You follow it too, Jeff. Like there's so much drama. There's even the off season right now is crazy. There's so much going on. So that's a 24-hour thing. And then when games are playing, we have clients here. I have all the guys that I work with here that I have to follow and watch and send them video the next day. So if I don't catch the game that night, I'm absolutely watching it the next day and breaking down the film for our guys. So yeah, I'm plugged in 24/7 to what's going on in the basketball world.
So without being too humble, but possibly being diplomatic, why didn't you make the NBA?
So my whole life was centered around making the NBA. I did everything I could possibly do. Would I have done things different, knowing what I know now? Yeah, probably of some things, but um, I've had a lot of time to think about that, because that to me was the ultimate dream. I think it was a size thing, Jeff. I'm 5'11". Um, I'm pretty quick. I'm very fast. I feel like I was in a good spot at Notre Dame and decent enough exposure to put myself out there. I feel like I absolutely developed an NBA skill set in shooting the basketball, but I think it was a size thing. Would it be different now if I was coming out of college now? It may be, because shooting, especially 3-point shooting,
Yeah.
and spacing the floor is more valued now. Um, But at the same time, defensively, as a shooting guard, I'm 5'11". It makes it tough to guard guys who are 6'5" and taller, you know. And I think I had that stigma of who would I have guarded, and how would I have done that and managed that. And I think that ultimately led to me not making the NBA.
Yeah. It's so interesting how competitive things are, but how there's so many knuckleheads. And I say here in Vermont that think, oh, I could play in the NBA. I scored 30 points a game at my small school of like 200 students. And it's just funny how competition is there. But you really seem to have found a niche in grinding, but still finding a vocation, doing something you love. Talk about some of the adversity that you've had to overcome to give you this opportunity now with prioritysports.biz.
So I've been training players since I was 14, 15 years old, because locally in Staten Island, New York, I made a little bit of a name for myself. I was putting up ridiculous scoring numbers, and younger kids wanted to learn. And so I've been training players and relating to players since I was that age. Um, when I was a sophomore in Notre Dame, I got arrested for possession of marijuana, and I wound up getting suspended from the university for about 6 months. Now, that 6 months was the most transformative time of my life. What did I do during the 6 months? I trained players. That's all I did. I trained myself, and I worked with kids, with youth basketball players, and that was always something that I wanted to do long term, because I felt an immense sense of fulfillment doing it. And I obviously loved being on the court, but I loved teaching the game as well. So as I got on with my playing career, I always thought about coaching. Should I try out coaching? But I kept coming back to the training piece and working with players individually, because that's what I did during the darkest time of my life. I was away from my teammates. I really felt like I had thrown away my dream during that time. But the court and working with players in that regard kind of gave me hope, gave me energy, and that's all I wanted to do during that time. And I was pretty depressed. So getting through that and relying on basketball for that, really, I think back to that almost daily during that time. I think back to that time daily now, because it helps me. It helps me relate to players. It helps me, when everything's going well and players are playing at their best, it's easy. But when they're down, when they have their own dark times, when they're concerned about their future, maybe an injury, maybe they do something stupid, maybe they just have a bad game and they're really down on themselves. I think the fact that I was in that spot myself allows me to reach back and connect with them. And I think in order to relate to players, especially at this level, you have to have some sort of a story to your life that enables you to connect with them at that level. Because as I said, when things are going great, it's easy. But when things are going bad, or when they're playing bad, it becomes tricky. It becomes difficult. And my ability to do that stems from the time that I got suspended from Notre Dame.
That's really good. And thank you so much for sharing that as well. As I mentioned over and over up here in Vermont, Boston Celtics fan, Gordon Hayward, that connection. Were you working with him when he broke his ankle?
No, not when he first came to Boston. No.
And so as you've worked with him, how does one overcome that mentally of being injured?
That is the $100 million question, Jeff. I think he's done a phenomenal job in doing that, but I don't know if I can verbalize a real answer for you for that. I think it's so traumatic what he went through that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of reps. It takes a lot of workouts. It takes a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of on his part, a lot of willingness to just kind of go for it, to trust his body again, to trust his feet again. and it takes years. It takes years.
Yeah. And I think that just is a reminder for us to be consistent and intentional with every day of our lives, not just thinking that we're going to get over the hump overnight. For you and what you do, prioritysports.biz, can you just talk to me how coaching high school students prepared you for what you're doing now? And do you miss hanging out with those high schoolers?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. Yes, I do miss hanging out with them. Such a transformative time in people's lives, being in high school, and they're so impressionable at that time in their life. Um, so it really was fulfilling, and you really felt like you were making an impact. And and I say to this day, high school coaches in any sport or high school educators in any school, they're really, really important to our society, because that age is such a fragile age for young boys and girls. So I do miss that a lot. How did it help me? Well, I think number one, we were not good. We were not good at all. Um, and so having to sort of, I just retired from playing professionally. Now I have to kind of go back down the ladder, literally all the way to the beginning. Really was amazing for me looking back in terms of relearning things, reteaching things. So it's in so many ways, it's serving me for the future. And also talking to high school kids, you have to be careful what you say. You have to watch what you say. You have to massage it correctly, and that's a little bit like what I'm doing now too with these players. Is you have to kind of every conversation is measured, because you're trying to sort of mold their mind a little bit into the direction that you know is best for them, or you think is best for them. And um, but at the end of the day, Jeff, and I'm sure you talk about this all the time, it's all about relationships, trust, and communication. And you know, amazingly enough, high school kids, they understand that too. So if I come at this with the same authenticity that I came at coaching high school with, I'll be fine.
Hey, a couple questions, and we'll get you out, Kyle Mack. Thanks again for making the time. And were you one that liked to watch video? Did you get in the film room like you hear about with so many football players and watch film? Were you one of those guys?
Yeah, yeah. Still to this day too. I think it's you know um, you always hear, or I always hear about the different ways in which people learn, and I always felt my response to this was always, if 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 I'm better learning by doing, than visually, then if I still go do on the court, but then I also supplement it with visual learning, like it's only gonna help each other, right? So I believe, and that's why I listen to so many podcasts, and like I surround myself with things to help me improve. That's all leaning in one direction. So I was big on video as a player, um, big on watching guys' feet in a game, because I think if you watch a player's feet, you can tell a lot about them, their skill set. Um, so yeah, and to this day, it's a really powerful tool for me with our players, is clipping together some film and showing them some stuff. So and you can't hide from film either, right? So if you and it was always your heart was always beating a little fast the next day, and in the film room after college after a bad game, because you knew you're going to get called out.
No, I always like watching film, and it was just funny to see some of the players on the bench. They had the most expensive shoes, but they were just sitting on the bench, so not watching their shoes, but watching their footwork and how they
Yeah,
played the
yeah,
game.
yeah.
Hey, for you, I had the opportunity to interview Jim Sweeney, playing for the Mob. ESPN did a 30 for 30 about him. He was actually under 6 foot as well, but he said that he has never stretched out or iced. How important is that, especially for young athletes?
Well, yoga changed my changed my life, really. Changed my career. Um, it not just stretched me out, but it gave me strength at full range of motion. Um, so, and ice and recovery and habits around recovery are really important, especially nowadays, because there's so much, the technology nowadays around recovery is so advanced, and it's proven that it works. Um, it's really important. And, some guys, they can get away with it. Others cannot. I couldn't. I couldn't get away with not stretching. I couldn't get away with not icing and eating right and taking care of my body. And literally, when practice was over, I'm already thinking about the next day, right? Recovering for the next day. So, um, but stretching and ice for me were huge. But it's more about the habits again around recovery. So, prioritizing the game means you're not going out on your feet the night before a game. That plays a part in it. When you get up in the morning, you're drinking water. You're not drinking soda. You're drinking a lot of water throughout the day. You're stretching after practice. You're using the foam roller. You're getting treatment. You're getting massages. You're doing yoga on your off days. You're getting some sun. You're sleeping really, as best as getting high quality sleep. So there's so many habits that lend well toward recovery that are really important. And some guys can get away with not having all of it dialed in. I couldn't. I had to have everything dialed in. So.
And so 2 questions, and we'll let you go. And thanks again for making the time. Prioritysports.biz is where you can find more information. So I am an assistant to the assistant on the JV girls basketball program here. And I often go back and forth because I'm 5'10". I love the 3-point shot because that was a great equalizer for me. But if you're speaking with a 15-year-old sophomore in high school and they ask you, should they be working on their weak hand or their 3-point shot? How do you speak to them?
I would say my real answer would be both. Um, Gun to my head, if I have to pick one, I would say work on your 3-point shot. Um, and the reason why I say that is because shooting is just it's the equalizer in basketball. If you could put the ball in the basket, you could play. If you could, I always say this to kids too, especially at the high school level, right? Like if you could just make free throw after free throw after free throw, and you're like 100% free throw shooter, at the end of the game, if you're winning, the coach is going to put you in because they're going to start fouling, and you're going to be the hero. It's like being a field goal kicker, in football. So shooting is a separator skill in this game. If you could shoot the ball and you could shoot it at a high level, and there's degrees to that too. I like to talk about, there's players who can't shoot, there's players who can shoot, make shots, there's players who can shoot, there's good shooters, there's great shooters, and then there's assassins, and so you climb the ladder until you finally get to an assassin level. And working on your weekend, of course. But if you look at a player like Tony Parker, Karl Malone, these are Hall of Fame players who, quite frankly, I don't know if the ball ever touched their left hand. Now, I would never advise a high school kid not to work on their weekend, but the real answer is both. You need to work on all of it.
All right, so I'll get you out on this question. It's actually a 2-part question, and I stole the first part from Hernando Planos. I don't know if you know Hernando, but the Be Contagious podcast. If or when, in your case, when the feature film is made about your life, who plays you in that feature film?
Man, this is a good question. I love this question. I've often been two guys. I've often been compared to, or not compared to, just similar look is Colin Farrell and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay.
So I would say one of them.
And then the second part is, and I know that you're happily married, but just for sake of the interview, who plays your love interest in that feature film?
Oh man, if you asked me when I was 16, it would have been Jennifer Love Hewitt. Jennifer Aniston is up there. Yeah, those Jennifer Aniston.
All right. Hey, Kyle, thanks so much for making the time. You're the best. We wish you all the best with our prioritysports.biz. And thanks again for making the time today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Great interview.
And again, that's Kyle making some time. You can find more information, Instagram and Twitter. My name is Jeff Fuller, J Fuller Interviews on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of J Fuller Interviews. Thanks all. And make sure you take the time and make the time to listen to someone's stories, because it will make your story much better, less ignorant,